So welcome everybody to this latest GCSE revision video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be going over the AQA GCSE Maths Higher Practice Paper Set 1 Paper 1, which is a non-calculated paper. Now, one thing to bear in mind, that as this is a specimen and practice paper released by AQA, that these were done before the actual release of the new style GCSE papers where the grades were changed from letters to numbers. Now, this paper and set of papers, I would say, are written a little bit more difficult than what's typically expected in exams, and I would say that if this was released, then the grade boundaries would be probably a little bit more generous than what we're kind of used to and expected to on the more dated exam papers. Now, there is a copy of the paper in the description below for you to download and have an attempt at before going through the answers of watching this video. Now, we'll put some suggested grade boundaries. As this paper wasn't released officially, there aren't any official grade boundaries, but I'll set the average sort of grade boundary you can expect from a typical GCSE Higher Paper 1 paper. So let's get straight into this non-calculator practice paper Set 1 non-calculator. So looking at question 1, it says circle the smallest number. Now, with these questions, one thing I would strongly recommend that you do is try and get them all so that they're all got the same number of numbers after the decimal point. So this number here would be 2.310, this would be 2.333, this would be 2.330, and this number will be 2.301. And then from this, all you're doing is just comparing the 3-digit numbers, because they all start with 2, and then circling which number is the smallest, which is our last option. For the next question B, it says circle the largest number. So again, I'm going to repeat the process. So the longest decimal number is 3 decimal points places. So it's 3.100, 7.111, 7.110, and 7.101. And again, from this, we're looking for which one is the smallest, and that is therefore it's the largest, sorry, and that is going to be our second option. Now, next question, question 2, says here is the sequence, and we've got 40, 35, 30, 25, 20. I want to circle the expression for the nth term of this. Now, personally speaking, I would probably just go into actually working out what the nth term actually is. So the difference is -5, so we're definitely going to have a -5n, and then think to yourself, how do I get from -5 to 40? Well, I need to add 45. So as you can see, none of these look like this, but if I flip the two terms around, I get 45 minus 5n, which is our third option. Then moving on to question 3, it says which of these is not a square number. So again, working out what these are, so this is going to be 4 times. Now, what you're looking for is basically, in terms of, although they all look in standard form, we know that 4, 4, 9, and 9 are all square numbers. So what we're looking for is which of these is not a square number. So for this, we've got 100. This we've got 1 million, and here we've got 1,000, and for this one we've got 10,000. Now, which one of these? Now, what you're looking for is basically an even number of zeros would therefore represent a square number, or a power of 10 that's been squared, or is a square number. So, and the one that hasn't got an even number of zeros is this one here. So it's 9 times 10 to the power 3. For question 4, it says work this out. Now, this can involve long division. There's several ways in which you can do this. It is worth 2 marks. Now, one thing I would probably start with is recognizing that if I multiply both these numbers by 100, I'm not actually going to change the value of the fraction, but I'm going to change the numbers in the fraction. So what I'm then going to do is work this out. And again, I do that by doing long division. And knowing your 12 times table should be pretty standard. So again, how many 12s go into 6? 0. Carry the 6. How many 12s go into 64? That's going to be 5. Remainder 4. How many 12s go into 43? That's going to be 3. Remainder 7. And then how many 12s go into 72? That's going to be 6. Giving me a final answer of 536. So moving on to question 5, it says the scatter diagram shows the number of driving lessons and the number of tests needed to pass by 10 people. And the question is asking us to circle the answer of which represents the correlation of this. Now, I would say that this is strong positive correlation. The next question then says, use a line of best fit to estimate the number of tests needed to pass by a person who has 50 tests. So what I need to do is get the ruler out, and what I need to try and do is to try and get as close as possible to those lines, which is going to be very difficult in terms of on the computer, which is always is the case. So I would say about there I would go for. Okay, so and then from this what I then want to do is predict how many tests are needed for someone who has 50 lessons. So again, for this all I'm going to do is find 50 along the horizontal axis, I project up and then go across. So I reckon it's around about 4, and that there is my answer. Then moving on to 5C, it says Mira says that I can use the trend line to predict the number of driving tests needed to pass for any number of driving lessons. Comment on her statement. Now, again, for 1 mark, there's several things you can do. So basically for this is any statement along the lines of that can only use the trend for when you've taken between 30 and 65 lessons. And or you could say that, for example, if you look at this, let's have a look at how realistic it is, because obviously we're looking at interpolation, extrapolation, something along those lines. But if you notice that if you took 25 lessons, then this graph or this trend is basically saying you don't have to take a test, which is kind of rubbish. So it is something along those lines. So you could say that from the trend line, 20 lessons implies 0 tests, which is a bit of a ridiculous statement. So again, something along those lines would be absolutely fine. So moving on to question 6, it says which of 2/5 and 5/8 is closer to the value of a half. Now for this what we're going to do is just some fractions to decimal conversions. Now again, for 3 marks you're not just simply going to get a mark for choosing which of those 2 fractions, so you have to show some working out, which obviously why it's stated there. So what we need to do is convert 2/5 into a decimal, so that's going to be 0.4, and then convert 5/8 into a decimal, which is 0.625. Now again, either you can recall those 5 memory, or you can do some division to work that out. Now from this we can see that this is minus 0.1 away and this is 0.125 away. Now the plus and the minus doesn't make a difference, but we're just going for which is the smaller digit, which is 0.1, so that means that 2/5 is closer to a half. Then moving on to question 7. Now one other way that you could do that is to get a common denominator with all 3 fractions, and so show which one is closer to the half. For question 7 it says that a shape is made of rectangles. On the diagram below, shade an area that is represented by the expression of AD plus CD. Now there's a couple of options you could have here. So you could have this and this as one answer, or what you could have is this area here and this area here. For question 7b it says on the diagram below, shade the area represented by the expression of D and then multiply by A plus 2C. So for this what I think I would do is to expand the brackets just so you've got more of an understanding, and then we then want to shade these areas. Now here AD is this middle area here and CD are these 2 on the side, so just highlighting or shading in the middle section, absolutely fine. Question 7c says write an expression for the area of the whole shape. So here we've got AB, this is going to be AD, this is AB, this is CD, and this is CD. So altogether what we've got? Well, we've got 2 ABs, we've got an AD, and we've got 2 CD. So any of the formations of those 3 terms being added together would be fine to get you your single mark. For question 8 it says circle the value of cos 30. Well, that's just going to be straightforward in terms of the root 3 over 2. Now for question 9 it says Alan, Ben and Carl ran a 1,000-meter race. The distance time graph shows the race, and the question is asking us who won the race. So we're looking for which person finished in the quickest time, and the quickest time is going to be for Ben. Let's just write his name, and the reason for it is because he finished in a quicker time. So something along those lines. You could quote what time you finished. I think it's 4.5 minutes, whereas the other two finished at 5. But again, for 1 mark, that's pretty much it. Now, in terms of describing the race for 4 marks, now again, I'm not going to go into detail and write this down because I don't want the video to drag on. So, but one thing you do need to do is you need to make sure you mention all 3 boys. Now, if I go back to the graph, something along the lines of just kind of describing the race in total, really, mentioning all 3. So you can comment on them individually. So you could talk about Alan first. So Alan started at a faster speed than the others, and then stopped for a quarter of a minute, and then ran slower than he did at the first start. Ben started at a steady pace, then slowed down, and then picked up the pace again, quoting the times and the intervals in which he did that. Whereas Carl started at a steady pace for about 4 minutes, and in the final minute started to speed up. So something along those lines would be absolutely fine, or you could say collectively of who was in the lead and what time people started. But I would definitely mention that Alan did stop for 15 seconds or a quarter of a minute, along those lines. And obviously then in terms of race, I wouldn't go into detail about what things they saw or ain't go into details about that. It's just a case of mentioning speeds, distances in terms of times, and also when Alan stopped. Moving on to question 10, which is looking at simultaneous equations. Now, with this, you should be able to notice that the x's and the y's are different amounts. So what we need to do is multiply one of the equations so that we're either getting x the same or y is the same. Now, it's entirely up to you which one you want to make the same. If you want to make x is the same, you multiply the second equation by 2. If you want to make y is the same, you multiply the second equation by 3. But ultimately, although the working out might be different, you should get the same answer if it's correct. So if I just multiply that one by 2, what I get is 2x plus 3y equals 15.5, and then the second equation is going to be 2x plus 2y equals 12. As the x is the same and they're both the same sign, I take away, so I'm left with y equals 3.5, and then using x plus y equals 6, I've got x plus 3.5 equals 6, so x equals 2.5. So in the boxes, that's what I should have as my final answer. Moving on to question 11, it says 5 integers have a mode of 6, a median of 8, and a mean of 10. And it says what is the greatest possible range of the 5 integers? You must show your working. So for this, let's start by doing our 5 dashes. Now, a mode of 6, we'll start with a median. So our middle number has to be 8. And with a mode of 6, I've got to have at least 2 6s. And the only smallest amount of 6 I can have is 2, because the numbers need to be in order. Now, in terms of the mean of 10, well, if I then work out the total sum, now to work out the total sum, it's always the mean times the number of numbers. So then that's going to be 10 times 5, which is 50. So all of these 5 numbers need to add up to 50. Now these 3 sets of numbers add up to 20, meaning that these 2 numbers need to add up to 30. Now, so I need to find 2 numbers that add up to 30, with the smallest number being 9. Now you might think to yourself, well, why can't it be 8? Well, it can't be 8 because if I chose 8, then the mode will no longer be just 6. It will be 6 and 8. So it has to be a different number to 8. So the smallest number this number can be is 9, and 30 take away 9 is 21. So then from this, that the range is going to be 21 minus 6, which gives me an answer of 15. Then working with question 12, it says write this expression in the form of where we just expanded it. So what we need to do here is expand. So here I've got 14x plus 8 minus 4x minus 24 plus 1. Then from this, all I then want to do is collect the like terms. So I've got 10x, and then looking at the numbers, I should have minus 15, and then what I then want to do is factorize this. So I've got 5, and then it's going to be 2x minus 3, and there is the final answer. Then moving on to question 13, it says here is a map, and the question's asking for the first one. So we've got map of France, and we've got a scale of 1 centimeter equals 80 kilometers. So the question says, estimate the time it would take to drive from Paris to Marseille. Assume that the road is straight and the average speed is 100 kilometers per hour. Now what you need to do for this, and again, depending on the size of your paper that you've got, whether it be A4 or A5, depending on, or even smaller. Well, let me just go through the directions, because obviously the answers are going to be different depending on the size. So first things first, you draw a straight line from Paris to Marseille. And what you then want to do is measure this line. And I definitely would measure it in centimeters. So measure in centimeters. So once you've measured that in centimeters, what you then want to do is multiply. So let's have a look at the measurement of the line in centimeters. You then want to multiply that by 80 because we want to work out what it is in kilometers. And then from this, what we then want to do is the time equals, and it's going to be the answers. If I just write a little blue box here, so it's going to be whatever that blue box is divided by, and then the speed, which is 100. So all I'm doing is time equals distance over speed. And then from this, we then want to work out what the answer is going to be. Now, if it's done on A4, then you're probably looking at an answer around about 6.4 to 6.72 as an answer. If you're doing it on A5, the answer is going to be somewhat different. I certainly wouldn't recommend dividing the answer by 2, but something along those lines would be fine. The next question then says, comment on how each assumption affects the accuracy of your estimate. Well, if the estimate is low if the average speed is lower, and the complete opposite is that the estimate is high if the average speed is higher. And something along those lines would be fine for the 2 marks. Now the next question, question 14, says that a pilot of an aircraft wants to fly from A to D. The aircraft flies from A to E 1 degree off course. And then 14.8 says that the distance from B to C is 1 mile. Work out the distance of D to E. Now, what you want to do here is recognize that this is a similar shape. So these are similar triangles. And for this, what you then want to do is first of all find the scale factor. So here I've got 2 triangles. One triangle has got a base of 60, the other triangle has got a base of 210. So here the scale factor is going to be 210 over 60, which is 21 over 6, which is 7 over 2, which is 3.5. And then what you then want to do is to work out the distance of D to E, which is this distance here. Well, it's just going to be, so D to E is going to equal the length corresponding side on the smaller, which is 1 times 3.5. So the answer then is going to be 3.5. Then for 14b it says, how should the aircraft have turned at C to fly directly towards D? And we just need to tick which is the correct option, and the correct option there is going to be between 1 and 2 degrees. Because obviously what we then try and do is go from, because obviously it's flown at between 1, so you want to then, obviously it's got a longer distance to fly, so then it's just going to deviate between there. Now the next question then says, the shape is rotated 90 degrees clockwise from point A and is enlarged by a scale factor of -2 from centre B. Draw the final shape on the diagram. Now this, obviously you're going to need to use some tracing paper. So first things first, what you want to do is rotate this shape 90 degrees clockwise from point A, and what you should have is your triangle looking something that looks like this. And again, you should be using a ruler. Let's work it out. So that's your first point, and then what you then want to do is enlarge this shape by a scale factor of -2. So -2 means it's going to flip. So for example, if I pick a point here, and that, if I just call it X, so B to X is 0 -1, And if I multiply that by -2, then that's going to be 0, and then it's going to be +2. So my starting point is going to be here, and then I'm then making it twice as big. So it's going to be 4, and it's going to be 6 across. So that's 3. Join those points up. Should have something that looks like that. But again, hopefully yours should be a lot neater. You should be using a ruler. For question 16, it says rearrange this to make x the subject. So this one is more complicated, rearranging the subject, because we've got two x's. So for this, what we want to do, if I put brackets around the denominator and move it across, so I end up with y lots of x minus 5 equals 4 minus 3x. I expand the brackets, so I end up with x, y minus 5y equals 4 minus 3x. Now what I then want to do is take the 3x, x is all on one side and everything else onto the other, so I end up with xy plus 3x equals 4 plus 5y. I then want to factorize this because I want to try and get single x, so I end up with this. And then once I've factorized it, I then want to take that bracket over to the side, so I end up with x equals 4 plus 5y all over y plus 3. And don't worry too much about the brackets, but that there is your final answer. Then moving on to question 17, it says the diagram shows a rectangle inside a semicircle. The rectangle has dimensions of 16 by 6. Work out the shaded area, give your answer in terms of pi. Now with most shaded questions, or shaded area questions I should say, it's always the area of the big shape, which in this case is the semicircle, minus the area of the smaller shape, which is the rectangle. So what I need to do is work out the areas of those two individual shapes. So the area of the semicircle, well, I need to first of all work out what the radius is. Now all I've been given is these two lengths here, and this is the radius. Now hopefully you would have spotted that this therefore is going to be, that should be a 6, not an 8. That if I halve this distance, that's going to be 8, and that then becomes a right angle triangle, which therefore means I can use Pythagoras. So we use Pythag to find r. So from this we've got r squared equals 8 squared plus 6 squared. So r squared equals 64 plus 36. So r squared equals 100. So r equals 10. And so from this, what I can then do is then work out what the area of a circle is, which is pi r squared, but it's going to be divided by 2. So using pi r squared over 2, it's going to be pi times 100 over 2, which leaves me with 50 pi. Then the area of the rectangle, which is going to be just the base times the height, so it's 16 times 6, which gives me an answer of 96. So then the shaded area is just simply going to be the big shape, which is 50 pi minus 96, and then the units are centimeters squared. Moving on to question 18, it says that two straight lines are shown. It says B is a midpoint of AC and TB to BS is in the ratio of 2 to 3. Work out the coordinates of T. Now this one is a little bit of a tricky one because obviously it uses ratios and it uses straight lines and coordinates. Now the key thing to remember is that this is not drawn accurately, so you can't really guess, although T is definitely on the left hand side of A, and I would say it's definitely above B. In terms of where it is in comparison to C, I would say it's slightly higher, but some of those things would be something that you just need to bear in mind. Now to make your life a little bit easier, one thing I would suggest with these types of questions is to try and label the axes based on the coordinates. So this point here is 15 and this point here is 6. This point here for S is going to be, well, I don't think we actually need that, but let's just put that there. So that's 31, and this point here for C is at 12, and that's also 23. So it's all along those lines. Now we know in terms of this that B is the midpoint of AC. So from this we can then work out what the coordinates of b is going to be. So the middle value between 15 and 23 is going to be 19, and the middle value between 12 and 6 is 9. So I can then work out what that distance there is. Now in terms of comparing the distances using this ratio here, that we know in terms of comparing the x values, that the distance between the x's, so between b and s, is going to be 12. So 12 equals, and how many parts is b to s? Well, b to s is 3 parts. So that equals 3 parts. And what we want to know is what 2 parts are. So 1 part equals, so 1 part is going to equal 4. So 2 parts are going to equal 8. So that means then that from 19, t is going to be 8 coordinates away. So 19 take away 8 is 11. Then if we'd repeat the same, but this time for the y ordinates, so here if I just write comparing y, just move it up slowly so you can actually see. Let me just zoom out, actually see that there. So looking at this in terms of comparing the two y ordinates from s to b, then what we've got is we've got in terms of, let's just go back to, sorry, t to b, we know that in terms of b to s, the difference between the points is going to be 6, and we know that 6 equals 3 parts. So therefore 2 parts is going to equal 4. And then from this, what we can then work out is then do the 9 plus 13. 9 plus 4. Because we're going higher. And 9 plus 4 is 13, so that there gives me my final call. Bit of a tricky one, that one, I'll definitely say. Now for question 19, it says that a cuboid has dimensions of x by y. X is increased by 10%, y is decreased by 20%. Work out the percentage and describe the percentage change in the volume of the cuboid. So here, first of all, let's work out the volume of the original cuboid, which is x squared y. Now for the volume of the new cuboid, well, that's going to be, well, if it's increased, if x is increased by 10%, then that's going to be 1.1x, and y, if decreased by 20%, is going to be 0.8y. So from this, what we've then got is we've got 1.1x times 1.1x times 0.8y. Now if we then work out what 1.1 times 1.1 is, and that's going to be 1.21, we then multiply that by 0.8, doing some decimal multiplication, whichever you want to do, but I would say just do 121 multiplied by 8 and go from there. But that should equal 968. So in terms of working that out, I would say it's going to be 0.9868, and that's going to be x squared y. Now from this, as you can see, so if that's 100%, so then 100 minus 96.8 is going to be 3.2. So it's going to be a 3.2%, and then because it's gone down from 1 to 0.968, it's going to be a 3.2 decrease. And it's really important that you do mention the word decrease, because it did ask you to describe the percentage change. Then moving on to question 20, it says circle the value of 9 to the power of minus a half. Well, minus a half means it's going to be reciprocal, and anything to the power of a half means the square root. So that's 1 over the square root of 9, and 1 over the square root of 9 is 3, so the correct answer should have is a third. Question 21, it's about expanding and simplifying. Now it doesn't really matter what order you multiply out the two brackets. I'm going to just go for these first two. So here, if I just write 2x plus 5, 2x minus 5, and 3x plus 7. And so expanding these, we should have 4x squared minus, it's going to be 20x, plus, no, it's not going to be 20x, it's going to be 10x. And then plus 10x minus 25. And then we've still got 3x plus 7. And then expanding all of this, what do we get? Well, we're going to get 12x cubed plus 28x squared minus 75x minus 175. And there is my final answer. So looking at question 22, it says write 26 over root 2 minus 12 over root 18 plus 2 root 50. As in the form of a root 2 where a is an integer. So this is going to look at quite a complex surds question. Now me personally, I would always try and think of simplifying any surds that is possible to simplify. So recognizing that root 18 is going to be root 9 times 2, root 2 shall say, which is going to be 3 root 2. And recognizing that root 50 is going to be root 25 times root 2, which is 5 root 2. So therefore 2 root 50 is going to equal 10 root 2. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply swap those two things in. So I've got 26 over root 2 minus 12 over 3 root 2 and plus 10 root 2. Now from this, what I want to try and do is get a common denominator. So here my common denominator is going to be 3 root 2. So for this, what I need to do is multiply this fraction by 3, in which I'm going to get 78 over 3 root 2. The second fraction is perfectly fine, so I'm just going to take that in its entirety because it's already got a denominator of 3 root 2. And for this one here, well, for that, I'm just going to multiply by 3 root 2 over 3 root 2. So what I end up with is going to be 3 times 10, which is 30, root 2 times root 2, which is root 4, and that's all over 3 root 2. Now from this, hopefully you can recognize that 30 times root 4 is the same as 30 times 2, which is 60. So from that, I've got 78 over 3 root 2 minus 12 over 3 root 2 plus 60 over 3 root 2. Now if I then, obviously I've now got a common denominator, so I've got 78 minus 12 plus 60 all over 3 root 2, which then becomes 126 over 3 root 2. Now I'm not quite finished because now what I need to do is rationalize the denominator of this. So I've got 126 over 3 root 2. And what I'm going to do then is multiply that by 3 root 2, 3 root 2. Well, you could, actually, let's make this easier, is to simplify this out. So I can cancel 126 by 3. So that then becomes 42. So I've got 42 over root 2. Then if I rationalize the denominator from here, what I end up with is 42 root, doing that. I've got 42 root 2 over root 4, which is 42 root 2 over 2, and they then cancel up to give me my final answer of 21 root 2. Now you may have gone a completely different route to that, but as long as you get the answer of 21 root 2 and you show ample working out, there's a good chance you'll get your full marks. Moving on to question 23a, this is looking at graph transformations. So the question says the graph of y equals sine x is shown between 0 and 360 degrees. On the grid, sketch the graph of y equals sine x minus 1 for that region. Now for minus 1, you take away 1 from the function, which means that you're translating the shape down 1. Why down 1? Because you've taken away 1. So all I need to do here is then just trace the shape so it looks something like so. For the next one, I am reflecting it along the x-axis. So again, that's going to look like so. And then for C, it says on the graph, sketch the graph of tan x. Well, again, it's just about a case of knowing what your trig graphs look like. And so let me just do the sort of dashed lines. And so you want to know as it's asymptotic to the points there, should look something along the lines of that. Then moving on to question 24, it says that a bag contains n beads and one bead is black and the rest are white. 2 beads are taken from the bag at random. Show that the probability that both beads are white is n minus 2 over n. Now for this, we've got that the total number of beads equals n. The number of black beads equals 1, and the white beads is therefore going to equal n minus 1. So selecting one at random, so if we select a white bead first, that's going to be n minus 1 over n. Then we want another one, so and. Now if we're taking another bead out, we've got one less white bead, so that's going to be n take away 2. And we've also got one less of the total number, which is n minus 1. Now from this, you should be able to spot that things cancel out. So this cancels with that, leaving me with just n minus 2 over n. And that's what we've been asked to prove. Now for question 24, it says the probability that both beads are white is greater than 0.9. Work out the least possible value of n. So using the answer from A, we've got that the probability of selecting 2 white beads is n minus 2 over n. And we want that probability to be greater than 0.9. So from this, if I then do n minus 2 is greater than 0.9 n, take the n over to the side, so n minus 0.9 n is greater than 2. This then becomes 0.1 n is greater than 2. Divide that by 0.1, and 2 over 0.1 equals 20. So what I end up with is n is greater than 20. So which is, if n is an integer, because it has to be, we want the least possible number. So n therefore is going to be 21. Then moving on to our last question, question 25, which looks at vectors. It says that ABCD is a parallelogram. ABE is a straight line from A to B, where the ratio of A to B to B to E is 3 to 2. BC and ED are intersect at F. A to B is equal to A and A to D is equal to B. And question A says work out E to D in terms of A and B. Give your answer in its simplest form. So with this, what we need to do is start labeling. Now in terms of the ratios, this is where it can get a little bit more complicated. Now in terms of this, A to B is A, and what we want to work out is what B to E is using this ratio. Now from this, like as we've got 5 parts, and we know that if 3A equals, let's call it 2x, then x is going to equal, or try and get A by itself in terms of what A equals. It's going to be 2x over 3. So this length here therefore is going to be 2A over 3. Now from this, to work out what E to D is, well, I can get from E to D by going from E to B and then B to A and then A to D. So writing those out, what I've got, E to B is minus 2A over 3. B to A is going to be minus A. And A to D is plus B. Now in terms of converting A, well, I can write that as a fraction, so it's minus 3A over 3. And then if I've got minus 2A over 3 plus that, then what that then becomes is minus 5A over 3 plus B. And there is my answer. So I can write this as minus 5A over 3 plus B. Now for question 25b, it says deduce E to F in terms of A to B. Now this is where it can get a little, where people don't see, and this question is a little bit difficult if you don't see it. Now what you need to be able to spot is that this is a similar triangle, like so. So here what I've got is I've got 2 similar triangles. So here I've got E to B and I've got B to A, and I've just labeled what those are there, and that's F. Now ultimately, because I want to work out what E to F is, I want to know what this distance here is, the route that I need to know is I need to know what this is. I need to know what F to B is. Now for this, what I need to do is use the ratio. Now in terms of looking at what this is, that I notice that E to F is going to be 2/5 of E to D. And again, where have I got that from is because there are 5 parts in total and B to E is going to be 2. So it's just a case of like working out what the scale factor is actually going to be. And the scale factor is going to be 2/5. Now in terms of E to F, well, E to F is going to be 2/5 of E to D, which I've kind of already worked out. So it's going to be minus 2/5 of minus 5a over 3 plus b. And if I then multiply that out, well, I got 2 times minus 5 is minus 10a over 15 plus 2b over 5. And again, if I simplify those fractions, I get minus 2 over 3a plus 2b over 5, and that there is my final answer. And there we go. Now I would say that's quite a pretty tricky vectors question, to be honest, because obviously it looks at similar triangles, looks at vectors, looks at fractions, looks at brackets, etc. So a bit challenging, definitely stingy for only 2 marks. And that concludes the end of this practice paper. Now again, there aren't any official mark schemes for this paper because obviously it's a practice, but I will put some general ideas of what the grade boundaries would be based on what the other exams are. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that this was a practice paper, and I would say compared to a lot of the official papers, this paper is a lot more difficult than the other one. So if you've done well on this, you can give yourself a pat on the back. If you haven't, well, there's a reason for it. And again, in terms of the boundaries, I would say if this was an official paper, the boundaries would be a lot lower than what's stated in the description.